Hello everybody, I'm Nora Burrows. Today we are going to start putting the blocks together from the improv block exchange I've been doing with my guild. I'm not only going to be putting these together in, the layout that was provided, but we're also going to be altering these blocks to kind of all fit together aesthetically, cohesively, because when you combine blocks made by 15 different people, using different fabrics, different values such as, lights and darks and modern or primitive, all of these blocks are gonna kind of look potentially strange together, but we're gonna make them look awesome, I hope. So let's take a look at the blocks first and then we'll lay them out. These ones here, just this pile, A, is from week 1. Each one of the weeks, the blocks were different sizes. So you can see week 2 is a different size, and each one had a different set of instructions. So none of these blocks I made, because I made my blocks and then exchanged them with my fellow guild members for their blocks. So let's take a look at these. There's 6 of these blocks from week 1, block A. I'm not going to comment too much on them. I think that they are all wonderful, all really special, but it is going to be a challenge to, make them come together cohesively. You can see these two next to each other are quite different. But these are just top stitched on with a blanket stitch. So that was a really easy block. I think it's really effective. This one is more modern. Now, what I'll say about this one, because it is one of my favorites. So the way that I did the block exchange since I was leading it is I would let everybody else pick their blocks and then I would pick whichever ones were left. So I kind of picked the ones that were less desirable by folks. And when people first laid their blocks out on the very first week, I saw this one and I thought, man, if I were to be picking blocks, I would pick this one. And then this one is the one that was left, which is kind of interesting, people's different tastes and that kind of thing. So I ended up with this beauty. This is a more simple diamond in a square with a border, square and a square. This one is kind of wild and crazy. This is the last one of the first week. And actually I own some of this fabric here. So it's kind of fun to see this in the block. And since I own this fabric, I can use this in other parts of the quilt when I start messing around with some of these blocks to add a little bit of theme and variation. Let's take a look at week 2. There's only 4 of these blocks. This one I think was a take on checkerboard. All really different. These 2 were obviously made by the same person. This one's really funky. That's week 2. Here's week 3. These are blocks C. This one is modern. I love this gray. It's almost a grunge, but it's actually not officially a grunge. This one aesthetically really goes nicely with the one before it. Those would go nicely together. So I would probably spread these out and not put them next to each other. This one also kind of goes nicely with that one. Except this one uses more batiks and then just a little bit of novelty fabric with the musical notes. These ones in this group, it's funny, they always seem pretty modern. I actually created this one. Sometimes in the weeks I was left with ones of my own. They didn't get picked. So this is one of the ones that I made. And this one is really wild. And if you look closely, there's some vegetables in there. This is another one that I made, and then this one, indigo. Blocks D, the 4th week, were smaller, little blocks, really cute. This one was, I have a video on this one. So this one, the instructions were to make a square and a square and a square and a square and a square, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see how different people interpreted that differently. So something like this would be easy to manipulate using this empty space. You can applique something or even, cut it and turn a piece, something like that. So this one will be useful. That's the last one for week 4. Here's the next week. This was the biggest blocks. These were 10.5-inch squares. I made this one. And this one has a little mermaid up in the corner. So I'm probably going to cover this up I don't really care for that mermaid so much. I think this block is really cool, but I will do something to either cover that or cut it and add something else. Not really sure yet, but I'll adjust that one. This is another one that you could just applique something in the middle. I think it's super cool. This is one of my favorites. This is another pretty cool one. The next week, this one's awesome. These two were obviously made by the same person. There were only 4 blocks this week, so that's it for that week. And then the last week, G, I made this one. This one is pretty modern. This one is the same. There's one farther back here that I think was made by the same person. This one. So I think this one and this one were made by the same people. Then we have this one and one more. Okay, I'm gonna lay these out. Let's see how they look. Here are all the pieces put together into the layout. Here's the layout here. So as you can see, the different letter blocks correspond to different parts of the layout. So I laid them all out. The cool thing is that, especially for the square ones, you can rotate them in any direction that you want. Same with the rectangle ones. You can put them, straight up or upside down and kind of, continue to play until you find a design that you like. So this I think is pretty cool. What I think I want to do is I want to alter some of the blocks, but I want to do it in sections. So I think what I'm going to do is these 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to focus on those 4 first, mess around with them, sew them together, and then I'll move on to the next section. This one is a little bit bigger than the dimensions. This is supposed to be 8.5 inches square. So I'm going to trim this down a little bit. For this one, which is also 8.5 inches square, I think I want to trim this black to be a little bit thinner and then add a lighter color strip on the outside. Then for this piece, after I trim it down, I'd like to applique something right in the center, maybe even a novelty fabric, and perhaps do some big stitching, decorative stitching along the triangles here. For this block, I was thinking, this is pretty done, but I could put a little bead right in the middle, and then this block here is pretty done. There's not really much to do with that. So to start, I'm going to trim this down and find a piece to applique in the middle. Here's the block I've been working on. I had this Frida Kahlo fabric here, and so I cut a piece out and sewed it, top stitched it onto this brown fabric. Now this brown fabric was just a scrap, so it had kind of this piece taken out of it, but I didn't really care about that. So then I sewed the brown piece with Frida onto the center of this blue diamond here. Then I added some top stitching, some hand stitching along the edge, and like I mentioned, trimmed this to be the correct size. So this one is done and looking good. This one, as you may remember, will go over this and next to this. So this is now not looking so cohesive with the rest of the blocks. So I need to alter some of these to still keep the integrity of the block itself, but to kind of blend and go together. So what I'm thinking is for this one here, which is what I'm going to work on next, I have some of this kind of purplish gray kind of modern-y print, which I think would go nicely with this blue. It's very calm, but it's still modern to kind of keep with the tone of the block itself. I could put kind of these strips coming up and down like this. To me, this fabric looks a little bit like rain or snow or something falling out of the sky. What I'm thinking is I'll attach these pieces onto here, maybe do a strip of green at the bottom to look like grass, and then applique some trees or houses, and then a nice big tree or something over here. I'm not so sure about the houses and tree, but I do like kind of these two together better than, with the black. I think that just works a little bit better. So let me cut these, sew them on, and then I'll see what I want to do, if I want to do any applique. This is how the block was. I took these pieces off and cut some pieces to be attached here. Now,
my thought is that this ends up getting a little muddled here. So if I were to flip the block so that the blue was along these two sides, it adds a little bit more definition kind of over here. However, this fabric here doesn't quite go anymore. Well, maybe it does. Let me think. What if I added a very thin bit of this brown, this alphabet fabric? I got this recently. I did a fabric haul and you saw it. What if I did just a very thin strip of the brown along the side and bottom, and then added my purpley gray fabric? I attached this bottom piece on the brown. I don't care for it. That's why I didn't attach the next part of it. I think what I'm going to do instead is cut a very, very thin strip of this. Very thin, do the same. I'll take this off, do the same along the bottom, and then add on my purple. In addition, I think what's going to help is this piece here. I have some really good ideas for this piece that I think will make this whole section look a little less messy. Here's where I'm at, little by little here. So I attached this on to the coral fabric. I have this piece from a different improv block that I created that I didn't end up using. I would like to, I think, put this along the side here and then cut another piece of coral to fill there, so it would look kind of like that. Okay, here it is. I even attached it to the Frida block up top, and I'm happy with this. I need to trim off the edge here, but let's take a look at this piece and think what we can do. I have some ideas. If you take a close look at this block, you can really split it into three pieces. You have a long seam here, so I'll seam rip that out, and these will become two pieces. And then there's a seam here that I'm going to take out. So I'll have a long strip and then two smaller strips. Let me do that, and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking next. I have my three pieces, the long piece and the two smaller ones. I'm going to put the long piece aside, and I can use that somewhere else in the quilt top down the road. I'm going to focus on these two pieces here. What I'm going to do is put one here and one here, and then I'll fill the empty space with this bulldog fabric. And I think that the blue of this bulldog will go nicely with the blue here. This block is finished. I think this piece is really coming together. So if I put this up here where it's gonna live, then I have this last one here. And, you know, I was gonna put a bead kind of in the center, but I think I don't wanna deal with beads in this quilt. And something about it is just not feeling right to me. So what I was thinking is that if you look at the way it's constructed, these are just half square triangles. There's 4 half square triangles. So what if I took it apart, flipped them so that the tan was in the center, and then maybe did something with the border, either make a very thin green with something around it, or I don't know, something. Let's take it apart and flip it and see how that looks. Here's kind of how it was. I removed the green, and then let's flip these and see if we put the cream in the middle. Now I will say that I'm not trying to make this block better. All of these blocks, I love every single one of them. I liked this just the way that it was, but what I'm trying to do is make all of the blocks come together in a cohesive fashion. So I think that this works a little bit better to put this maybe trim on. I think this could be cool. It's not my favorite. The other thing I could do is this crazy yellow, which I don't hate, but it is a little bit, I don't know if it totally goes. And in terms of construction, I would sew this on first. I would sew this onto all 4 pieces and then sew the pieces. So in terms of construction, that would be really bulky around the seam there with this one, whereas this would just be a little bit flatter. I think I'm going to do this one. Let's look at it in in the piece. Now it did have a border around the whole thing, and we may put a border on again, but for now, let's just look. Yeah, I mean, I think that that would go nice with the dog fabric. I think I keep calling these bulldogs, but I think they're actually not bulldogs, they're something else. So yeah, and then it also kind of goes with this fabric down here. It's just not super exciting. This one is pretty exciting. Maybe we should just try this and see. I mean, that's pretty cool. Let's try this one. Okay, these are kind of strange, but let's just see what happens. So what I'm gonna do, I've sewed my pom-poms on. I'm just gonna obviously trim it off, but what I'm also gonna do is along the edge here, cut the pom-pom off to reduce some of the bulk, like that. There used to be a pom-pom there. So I'll do that for both edges for all four, and then I'll sew them right sides together, 1/4 inch, open them up and see what we got. This didn't work out so well. First of all, this one I put facing the wrong way. So you see all these pom-poms are facing towards the burgundy. This one, the pom-poms are facing towards the tan. So I made a big mistake there, but that's kind of like the least of the problems with this block. It is just all over the place. It is hopeless at this point. So what do I do since I'd like to use parts of this in the quilt. Let me think. So I have these strips. I have 4 of these strips. Let me think for a minute. To keep with the diamond theme of this block, I cut out this little quail diamond here. Really cute. And then these were the strips from the initial block. So I'll sew those around the diamond. And then I'll need to add something to square it off. Either this yellow or more likely I'm thinking maybe like a navy blue or something, but I'll sew these on and then experiment with the yellows and blues for the background. Here is the finished block, and I have sewn it into the unit. I am sad that I completely ruined that initial block. That is a disappointment, but you know, that's part of experimenting. Sometimes amazing things come out of experimenting. Unexpected surprises that can end up being your most favorite thing in the quilt, and other times you completely destroy a block like I did today. But this is fine. My only complaint is that this is very, very bright compared to the rest of the quilt. I'll bring this over here. Let's get a look of the whole piece here. I'll bring this over to the other blocks in the quilt so that you can see it next to its neighbors. But it is very bright. This here is very bright compared to what's around it. So I may need to think about that and do something about that at that point. But for now, I'm really happy with this. Let's go take a look at it in the larger piece. And here it is in the larger piece up in that corner up there. I think it's looking pretty good. It starts to get kind of dark when we come up into this section here, so that's something that we'll have to keep in mind. In the next video, we will work on the next section, probably, you know, this section up here, I would guess. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss that. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. And here's a close-up of it in the larger piece. I could tell that you couldn't really see it from way back there, but there it is. Thanks for joining me.